warrior known as Evo, and the blonde girl who was his daughter stood ready for combat against the assassins who had come for their life. The assassins had come for both of their lives. Evo warned the girl to keep her distance and stay behind him as he assumed a combat posture and readied his greatsword. The young woman objected and stated that she could not handle the thought of leaving her father to face the assassins by himself. Evo gently informed her that he had made a serious promise to her mother that he would defend their daughter no matter the cost, even if it meant giving his own life. This commitment was to safeguard their daughter in the event that she was ever in danger. Even though it was extremely painful for him to put her in such jeopardy, he was aware that this was their one and only opportunity to stay alive. At that same moment, the assassins unleashed a tremendous and whirling barrage of ghostly fire with the intention of destroying Evo and the girl where they stood. Evo was aware that if he did not stop this bomb, it would decimate everything within a wide radius. He had a firm grip on his greatsword and was getting ready to execute his most powerful maneuver, which was known as the Varosha Slash. Evo channeled all of his might into the motion of slashing his blade into the blazing fire. The spectral flames broke apart in front of the buzzing steel and quickly extinguished themselves. Evo's assault continued, ultimately severing one of the assassins in two and severing his body down the middle. The second assassin, however, was able to take over the body and powers of his dead friend before the separated pieces could fall to the ground. As a result of being corrupted and given more strength, the last remaining assassin morphed into a horrible two-headed creature that was encircled by foul purple-blue flames. The blonde girl instinctually drew back her boasting as soon as she saw the hideous thing that her father was now forced to face. An ethereal arrow that was glowing with the potential to cast a spell came to life. She let the arrow fly directly into the monster's heart, but it absorbed the magical projectile with no sign of being phased in the least. Evo and his daughter girded themselves for the next part of the struggle, certain that they would fight to the bitter end if that was what was required. The monster towered over them, looking like something out of a nightmare and intent on committing murder. The seasoned warrior Evo begged his daughter Neville to run away to a place of safety since the apostles of the Dark Guild were much too powerful for either of them to be able to take on alone. He cautioned her that none of her abilities would be useful against these cunning adversaries by saying that they would be immune to all of them. However, before Neville could raise any objections, one of the apostles pounded their fist into the ground, causing seismic shockwaves to be sent forth that split the ground beneath them. The apostles used the power of the impact to propel themselves towards Evo at breakneck speed, where they delivered a crushing strike that sent the warrior flying across the field of battle. He was knocked completely unconscious after colliding with a boulder, and blood began to drip from his mouth as a result of the impact. "Father," Neville screamed, but Evo did not react in any way. Evo had persuaded his daughter to forsake him and save herself while she still had the chance, despite the fact that he was seriously injured and his greatsword had been shattered. However, the apostles did not waste any time and quickly merged together to form a terrible composite beast that had three veiled faces perched atop its leaking blue aura. The monster was much taller than Neville and her father, and its clawed hands were capable of unleashing fiery talons. Neville watched in shock as the unconscious Evo laid defenseless in front of the terrifying beast. She was aware that they were in their final minutes, but she suddenly had the realization that there was one more desperate deed that she could perform. Neville begged with the monster, saying that if they would just spare the life of her father, she would gladly accompany them on their journey. The masks appeared to be giving her proposal some thought, with the apostles of the Dark Guild muttering to one another within the ugly shell of their combined bodies. Neville held her breath as she waited, hoping against hope that they would acknowledge her sacrifice and save Evo's life. All that was left for her to do was to offer herself as a sacrifice and pray for a miracle, as she was willing to do anything in order to spare the life of her cherished father. But the apostles merely screamed menacingly at Neville and her father, making it abundantly plain that they intended to kill both of them. Neville's heart almost stopped as she heard their dreadful cries, and she accepted the fact that this was the end of everything. The monstrous beast had just turned around to deliver the last blow when it was suddenly brought to the ground by a massive force, which caused the surrounding area to shake violently. Neville was thrown backwards by the strong winds that were generated as a result of the hit. Neville was startled to see a massive woolly mammoth standing over her once she regained consciousness and saw that it had just finished annihilating the apostles of the Dark Guild. Neville was at a loss to decide whether or not this unexpected turn of events made her feel relieved or horrified. When Neville got a better look, she discovered that the mammoths had really had a small house perched on top of it. And as she peered still closer, she saw an immortal frog wearing a cloak and wielding a staff. He had been leading the mammoth the whole time. The croaking of the frog served as an alert that the threat had been eliminated. He inquired with his other traveling buddies about the best way to approach the defenseless humans. On top of the frog's own head was a house that was even smaller, and within that house was a robot dog whose name was Wang Tsai. Wang Tsai reassured the frog that the humans did not intend any harm against them and that they were in need of their assistance. When Neville finally opened her eyes, she found that she was in an environment that was utterly foreign to her. She was surrounded by cutting-edge technology but had no idea where she had been transferred to at the time. Neville was in a panic as she tried to figure out where her father may be because the last time she saw him, he was severely hurt and unconscious. If Ivo does not receive treatment in a timely manner, he may very possibly perish from his wounds. Neville, confused and distressed, made a desperate plea for assistance. She held on to hope that whoever had rescued her from the apostles would also have compassion on her afflicted father. It was a matter of life and death for him, and if he did not make it out of this weird realm alive, Neville would be left completely on his own there. Neville, overcome with a sense of urgency, rushed out of the room in search of her father. However, as soon as she yelled his name, Ivo appeared, magically whole and looking as ripped as ever. He appeared to be the image of health as he stood there grinning and flexing in the sunlight. This unexpected turn of events left Neville perplexed. When she had last seen him, Ivo was bloodied and on the verge of passing out from his injuries. What factors might have contributed to such a remarkable turnaround in health? Ivo was talking to Lee and the Demon Queen nearby at the same time. Lee remarked on Ivo's amazing body and praised his great determination to staying in shape despite the fact that he was getting on in years. Ivo emphasized that in order for a fighter to be successful in battle, it was essential for them to be physically prepared. He could not believe the culture of the warriors that existed in this new world because it was so alien to him. Exactly at that moment, the robot dog Wang Tsai ran up to Lee in an attempt to get the attention of his master. However, the unexpected commotion disturbed the Demon Queen, who continued to retain resentment for Wang Tsai as a result of their previous disagreements. She reacted angrily by kicking the dog away and yelling at him, wanting to know why he had allowed these strangers to enter their home. Wang Tsai cowered and sobbed when confronted by the intimidating figure of the Demon Queen. He made an attempt to explain that the humans were in imminent danger and that he only wanted to be merciful to them. On the other hand, the Demon Queen was having none of it. She continued to scold the poor dog, who could only whimper and beg for mercy as she yelled at him. Lee was so taken aback by Ivo's ripped physique that he couldn't wait to get his hands on the fierce warrior's biceps and compliment his toned body. Ivo's ego was stroked by the attention, and as a result, he offered to demonstrate several poses in order to demonstrate his strength. After that, Ivo triggered his ultimate 100% battle soul burning mode, at which point his garments began to tear away, revealing muscles that maximum flexed in a manner reminiscent of the judo master Rashi. Lee's eyes lit up like stars as he watched in total awe as the elderly fighter underwent such a remarkable metamorphosis. He enthusiastically applauded for Ivo as he moved through a variety of stances that were reminiscent of bodybuilders. During this time, Neville watched everything that was going on with a confused expression on her face. She couldn't help but wonder who these odd people were and why her previously seriously injured father was suddenly performing for them. The circumstance was completely peculiar and embarrassing to be in. When Ivo at long last became aware of the presence of his daughter, he accepted that Neville had finally come to. He claimed that he was only trying to make their rescuers happy and show his appreciation for them saving their lives by doing what he did. The Demon Queen interposed herself between Ivo's father and daughter before Ivo could say anything further. She was very direct in her statement that since both were obviously doing well at this time, they should hurry up and leave. The demonic queen's tone did not allow for any kind of debate. Neville recoiled in fear in the presence of such an authoritative and mysterious figure. Neville was confronted directly by the Demon Queen, who informed her that she had already established her authority over Lee. The Demon Queen thrust her large bosom into Neville's armored front as a means of demonstrating her superiority. Neville recoiled in terror as she watched the attractive but domineering figure's hostile actions, telling her she was here first before she arrived. However, Lee quickly stepped in and intervened, touching the Demon Queen on the shoulder and pushing her to behave more civilly. He said that it was unusual for them to have visitors, thus it was proper for them to have polite conversation while drinking tea indoors. Although she continued to cast a murderous glare in Neville's direction, the Demon Queen eventually gave in. Inside, Lee apologized for the rudimentary hospitality and offered some tea before adding that this isolated home did not have much to offer. He urged the travelers to take advantage of the refreshments that were provided. Neville inquired as to if the tea was in possession of the miracle healing elixir that had successfully treated her father's wounds. Lee couldn't help but giggle because he knew that statement was hyperbolic. The tea did not contain any unique qualities on its own. Still irritated, the Demon Queen mumbled something about why Lee had let such feeble humans into their domain. Did he intend to perform some sick experiments on them? Was he implying that she, by herself, could not make him happy? After then, Evo began to describe his fuzzy memories of what happened after he lost consciousness while fighting the apostles. Lee was presented with their beaten forms by Wang Tsai, and he did nothing more than pour water into Evo's mouth. The seasoned fighter was instantaneously restored to full health and fortified as a result of this. Lee was the one who Evo credited with saving his life. He believed that without Lee's intervention, Evo would have passed away, leaving his daughter without a parent. Lee retorted in a humble manner, claiming that he had merely done what anyone else would have. But Neville and Evo were taken aback by Lee's unexplained ability to bring a guy back from the brink of death with just a drink of water. On the other hand, Lee politely insisted that there was no need to put on airs and that she should just drink. Neville and Evo both took a sip of the tea at the same time, opening their eyes wide as a brilliant energy spread throughout their bodies. Neville and Evo were overtaken by joy, and they collapsed into a haystack to take in the heavenly atmosphere and soak in the rays of the sun. They were in a state of nirvana and could not contain their rejoicing after drinking the tea. They had never before experienced the wonderful flavor of that dish. They also saw a miraculous improvement in their magic talents as a result of drinking the tea. Neville moved up one level from being a 1-star mage to becoming a 1-star archmage, while Evo advanced one level from being a 3-star archmage to being a 4-star archmage. Even Neville's mother, who had finally come to, sprouted hairy ears, which was evidence of her own newly discovered power. After partaking of such ambrosia, the problems of the outside world appeared to be of very little consequence to Neville and Evo as they returned to the present. When Lee saw that their cups were empty, he offered them additional tea, but Evo respectfully declined his offer. The seasoned warrior believed that Lee had already shown the overwhelming kindness that was proper for a man of God. It was difficult for the proud warrior Evo to accept such hospitality from someone who appeared to have boundless power, but he eventually admitted that he could hardly endure Lee's generosity. However, Lee seemed unconcerned about Evo's distress and explained that he was pleased to help fellow travelers in need regardless of their rank. Despite the Demon Queen's apparent continued mistrust, Lee and Wang Tsai had behaved in a friendly manner with them. Both Neville and Evo harbored the hope that one day, should their lives ever cross again, they would be able to repay that compassion. They made preparations to leave this strange new place for the time being, feeling fortified and enlightened by Lee's compassion. The warmth from the tea lingered within them, igniting a spark of hope. As the Demon Queen Elizabeth had seized ownership of everything else in the house, Lee was left without any better drinks or snacks to offer. He deeply regretted this fact, because he did not want to make her angry. He dared not take any of it back. Elizabeth insisted that everything was hers and that they should not touch any of it. She claimed ownership of everything. Lee once more expressed his regret and said that he prioritized Elizabeth's peace of mind over successfully hosting the event. Lee then asked about the circumstances that led to the travelers being attacked once the subject was changed. Evo related that the reason was because Neville had elven blood running through his veins. In elf culture, intermarriage is strictly banned, but her mother had been an elf saintess and had given birth to Neville after falling in love with Evo. Lee knew that because Neville was of mixed heritage, she was a target for being a rebel against elven traditions. Elizabeth commented in a flippant manner that such discriminatory customs will become extinct once she was the sole ruler of the world. Evo continued by saying that he had fled into hiding with Neville after his wife had returned to the Holy Land of the Elves after she had visited there. However, the elves ultimately became aware of her existence and dispatched operatives to retrieve them from their hiding place. Evo's wife had offered herself up as a sacrifice in the hopes of persuading the elves to spare their lives. This time, it was dark mages of the demon realm working on behalf of their guild that were chasing after them. When the demon world was mentioned, Lee went to Elizabeth and asked, could she be connected to it? The thought that the Demon Queen had any kind of relationship with such despicable beings caused the Demon Queen to sneer. The Demon Queen became enraged at Lee's insinuation and demanded to know what he meant by what he said. Lee was quick to retract his statement and offer an apology for the careless comment he had made. In an effort to diffuse the tension, Lee asked his guests, in a reassuring tone, for additional information about this wicked guild from the demon realm and the reason they were kidnapping elves. Evo elucidated that the objective of the guild was to reawaken the fabled Demon Queen Elizabeth, who was once responsible for bringing the entire globe under her rule. They were looking for a variety of resources, including elves, in order to conduct their sinister experiments on humans. When the Demon Queen heard this, Lee gave her an amused look, which only served to further inflame her fury. In her rage, she seized Lee and reprimanded him for his rash assumptions, telling him that of course she was the real Elizabeth, and not some imposter who they intended to bring back to life. As they continued to argue, Lee, who was becoming flustered, emphasized that he had never had any doubts about her identity and begged her to calm down. Neville turned to her father for clarity after being perplexed by the peculiar relationship between the two of them. Evo hushed her and admonished her to behave appropriately while their hosts argued. The Demon Queen wondered how the people of the planet could believe that she was dead when she was standing right in front of them. Evo said that Elizabeth had not been seen for the past 500 years, and if she were still alive, there is little doubt that she would have seized control a long time ago. This information shook up Lee, who stutteringly explained that Elizabeth had only been living with him for a little over a year, and not for centuries. Inquisitive at this point, the Demon Queen avidly inquired as to the details of the reports concerning the supposed circumstances of her demise many years ago. Evo dithered since he wasn't sure whether or not the story would inflame the volatile Demon Queen even further. Neville related the story with some reluctance, explaining that the great hero had eventually triumphed against Elizabeth after an epic struggle that lasted for an entire month, but it had cost him his life. The Demon Queen's rule came to an end 500 years ago when the two of them were destroyed by each other. Elizabeth became infuriated when she heard this made-up story. She conjured up a nightmare realm full of floating skulls and demanded to know how they could get away with spreading such lies while her eyes were flashing scarlet. The terrified Neville and Evo instantly changed their stories and confirmed that Elizabeth had been telling the truth. In an effort to lessen the impact of the news, Lee remarked that he must be the mythical hero from the story because his computer had identified him as such. This took Neville and Evo by surprise, and they gaped at each other in disbelief when they realized that the modest Lee could be the legendary warrior. Neville and Evo were taken aback when they learned that Lee and the woman who stood in front of them were, in fact, the legendary hero and Demon Queen, respectively. As they passed out from the overwhelming nature of the situation, comedic blood spurted spraying out of their noses. Their tongues were foaming, and their minds were reeling as they tried to comprehend how they could be dining with the living manifestations of such significant historical legends. It was inexplicable by any standard of logic or reason. During the time that they were out, Elizabeth cast a suspicious glance in Lee's his defeated slave and taking terrible pleasure in her incarceration. Elizabeth pounded the table in exasperation when she finally came to, and was able to shake off her paranoid images. She'd had enough of these stupid folks and their lies by the time she reached that point. The Demon Queen turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, declaring that she would not waste another minute of her time with such disgraceful company. She blushed furiously, thinking Lee was pushing boundaries with his arrogance. Slamming the broken door, Elizabeth decided Lee was far too annoying for her to endure tonight. Meanwhile, Evo asked Lee bluntly what he planned to do with them now. Lee laughed nervously, admitting he needed time to think things through after Elizabeth's dramatic exit. Lee reasoned that Elizabeth must have broken time itself to arrive in this era. That would explain the 500-year gap since the age thought her dead. Until the temporal disruption stabilized, time would remain out of sync. Later that night as the moon shone down, Neville whispered to her father that they never expected the infamous Demon Queen had given everything up for love, just as he did. But Evo hushed her. They could not compare themselves to the likes of Lee and Elizabeth. All they could do was wait and hopefully spared their insignificant lives. They shivered, afraid of displeasing the mighty hero. But Neville wondered, if Lee meant them harm, why save them at all? Her father cautioned that to beings like Lee and Elizabeth, humans were mere ants to toy with on a whim. With but a sip of tea, Lee had nearly destroyed them despite his congeniality. Their fate rested entirely on his mercurial moods. Evo advised Neville to stay on good terms with their hosts, since currying favor could mean the difference between life and death. Just then, they heard Lee's footsteps outside as he noted they were still awake. Neville froze in fear, dreading what the hero might do. But Lee just chuckled, telling them not to be afraid and ask Evil and Burrs that since they are still not asleep so late. So what are they doing this late? Evil get too scared to see Leping like that she thought this is the real end of her life. But Leping turns on the light and asks that if they haven't slept yet how about playing cards. Burrs have a confused expression on his face as he don't know what playing cards means. Then in the light of a candle they all sit on the floor to play cards. Leping explain all the rules of cards to them. And to confirm he asks if they understand everything. Burrs reply that he understand roughly. Evil was thinking that as her dad told her because this is Leping's test for Evil and Burrs to decide whether to kill them or not. Ping thought that if they understand 50% of what he said then it's good. He said he'll start dealing cards then. Evil had a question to ask Ping but she hesitated to ask. But at the end she couldn't control her desire to question and she asked Ping, "What's the name of this game?" She asked it because there's a sinister aura emanating from these cards that she don't understand. Ping was surprised by her question as he was not expecting her to ask it. That question really stumps her at the moment. He thought that landlord card is probably not easy to understand for the people of this world. So he come up with a new name, decide to call it Dragon Fight. He chose that name because it was cool, but that cool name scared the shit out of Evil and Burrs. Both of them were too shocked to hear that name. Elizabeth, who left before and angry, couldn't sleep, so he comes to check. She used her high-level magic concealment technique to part her body and soul. Now she was in form of soul so others cannot see her and she can pass through anything. When she was roaming around the house she hear that Ping is playing Dragon Fight, so she stopped to look. Ping explained what the Dragon Fight means to them. He told them that both of them are brave heroes who have to join forces to defeat the dragon. They can decide whether to be the hero or dragon according to the cards they draw. Whisper to Evil that as he expected before, this sure is a test for them. In both father and daughter's vision Ping looks like villain. Ping start dealing cards and he warns them to think carefully before they choose. Ping pick up his cards and told them to also look at their cards. Burrs whispers to Evil that there's no room for hesitation now. He asked her to take her cards. Evil was scared to even pick up those mysterious cards. Just when she touched those cards she felt like she have suddenly teleported in a demonic hell. Burrs was shocked. He thought, is this another realm? Evil was shaking in fear. She realized that it's not good, because just picking up the cards drained all her magic power. She can't even move her body, so she looked at her dad and said sorry because she can't help him more. Burrs told her that it's okay and asked her to leave the rest to her dad. On the one side it was life and dead situation, and on the other hand for Ping it was just like playing normal cards. He asked Burrs if Burrs want to be a dragon. While looking at his cards Ping thought that although he don't have many big cards, it's still a very good set. He also has big and small kings, so it's not bad, it worth a shot. Burrs and Evil reply that they don't want to be a dragon. Both of them have some good cards but they don't know it. Ping thought that if he get another 4 and 2 he'll have a winning hand. He again asked them if they are sure they don't want to be dragon. What Ping means by being dragon is if they want to change cards. But both Evil and Burrs deny because they don't understand it. Ping said he won't be polite then and he pick up a card. But when he turns the card they are not that good, which could be seen by Ping's face. Both Evil and Burrs started shaking in fear, thinking is Ping dissatisfied with their performance. Ping said he'll play first, and he played an 8. It was now Burrs' turn. Burrs thought as long as they pass this test, Ping will spare them, so they can't give up now. But when he pick up a card he suddenly feel pain in his heart. Every time they play a card it's at the cost of their life force. But Burrs endured it and serves a J. Burrs was shaking in pain when Evil saw him like that. She gets scared. But Burrs told her that he is fine, so leave everything to him. Scared Evil passed this round and then it was Ping's turn. He looks at his cards and thought that besides the royal flush, a straight from 7 to Q3 4 seconds with a pair of 5s, only 10 and Jer left. Should he break the a pair or not? If he do fail I'll play a 2 and he'll be at a disadvantage. Ping was thinking too much and was getting too nervous. Ping said forget it, he also pass. Burrs was too shocked to hear that he just pick up a card and get his sucked of his life force and now he have to do it again. He asked Ping he really not want it. Ping smiled and said no. Now all the pressure was on Burrs. He thought Ping is deliberately making him continue to play cards that will continue to consuming his life force. In this situation he have to get rid of all his cards as soon as possible. Burrs directly show his 8 cards: 2 queen, 3 6 and 3 7. He said that according to the rules, this combination of cards should be called Flying Dragon. But when he put those cards his heart skipped for a second. This move of his consumed large amount of his life force, but he endured. The price for this move was Bureau 1 leg. Now he knows that the bigger the cards he play the bigger the price will be. But what he didn't expect was that a huge flying dragon made of spiritual energy could come out from his move. Both Evil and Burrs were too shocked to see it. Dragon start to prepare his attack on Ping. He attack on Ping. Elizabeth watching everything from sidelines. After attacking on Ping, spiritual dragon disappear. Burrs got really scared, because it turns out that playing a combination of cards leads to a losing situation. Burrs say he doomed. He just offended the legendary hero. He will dead this time. But Ping is fine, he don't get any scratch from dragon attack. Ping say to Burrs he play really good. Burrs don't believe in eyes. After dragon attack Ping is fine. Ping smile and say he don't want it. He can continue. Burrs hands are shaking. He say he understand. He play his card A3. Evil say he pass. Then this time is Leping turn. He play his card. Both Burrs and Evil say they can't beat it. Lepin smile and start to prepare a powerful move. Suddenly they surrounding by a powerful blue light. Burrs shocked to see that. A sky-destroying wave come out behind from Lai Ping. Wave attack on Burrs and Evil. Burrs say to his daughter Evil hang in there. But Evil is worried about his dad. But sky-destroying wave swallow both of them. After surviving form Lai Ping attack, Burrs and Evil say that they can't play anymore. Then Leping start to prepare his next move and say next is three of a kind with a pair. Horse car come out from air with soldier and prepared to attack on Burrs and Evil. Burrs got really scared and say he can't beat him. But Evil say he wants to try. He prepared his cards, but Burrs is against the decision. He say if you want to play he have to pay the price with his life force. Evil don't listen and say he can't hide Bindi. He also want to protect his father. After saying that he also prepare the same move as Leping. Then we show two horse car with soldiers start to fight each other.